Which verse are you using? Oh, I was using this one. Let's see.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yehovah Zebaoth. Melech haolam. Bebakwasha. Tishma wata'ane. Et tefilotenu. Wagam king takhanunenu. Will you hear and will you answer our prayer and our supplication? Yehovah Melech haolam. Tishmana. Et za'akwat amka Yisrael. Will you hear even the crying out of the children of Israel? Melech haolam bebakwasha. Shublanu et debarim hatobim. Returning to us even the good things. Asha ata diborata el nebe'eka. Which you have spoken even unto your prophets. Yehovah Zebaoth melech haolam. Shub ish le isha. Return man to woman. With isha la ish. And woman to man. Bebakwasha. La ak la ak. For brother to brother. Wagam kain la akot la akota. And for sister to her sister. Yehovah Eloheinu bebakwasha. Shub la nu et lashonenu. Return unto us even our tongue. Babakusha Yehovah melech haolam. Teberekna eta machane hazo. Wagam kena Yehovah melech haolam. Babakusha Eloheinu. Al tishe na et bnei adat. We ask you to even bless this camp, O Yah, and to forget not bnei adat. Yehovah melech haolam. Tilamed na et sefata ledabel et debareka. Even teach my mouth to even speak your words, O Holy One of Israel. Yehovah melech haolam. Shub lanu et debarim hayafim asha ata dibalta. Return unto us even the beautiful things in which you spoken of. Melech haolam. Shub lanu et lamishpaka. Return family to family, O Holy One of all that there is. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Amen. Well, amen. One of the things we want to sit there and point out, giving honor and praise to the Creator and to the Maker of heaven and earth, brothers and sisters. Getting this back up. 1 second. Okay. Giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. Just press the wrong button just real quick for a second. And that's this. This is a presentation being brought to you from the camp Shema Yisrael, headed by Nasi Zipor, as well as his son, Nasi Natan El, now beloved Chief Natan El. So this is something we want to sit there and point out. It says, Hallelujah, hungry for knowledge. It's a lot of hate going around. Why? I'm not exactly too sure. But I want to state that you're going to have some who will agree with what you're saying, and then some who will disagree with what you're saying. You understand, such is life. You know, can't sit there and in layman terms sweat everything on everybody. One of the things I realized online is this. Like on my personal channel, I put my face there and my books are advertised with my telephone number, and Shema at the end of Shabbat services, they state how to be reached. What I noticed online is some people who may agree or disagree, they never seem to show their face. Not that you have to, but if you're going to be one who at least disagree with something, at least have the courage to show your face or give a way for yourself to be contacted outside of email. That's just my 2 cents on that. Because if I feel in that I disagree or have a reason to disagree with someone and feel that that person is worth my time, I'm not going to sit there and hide behind the computer, behind the image of an animal. For instance, I know on my personal channel, there's somebody that decided to make a comment and basically disagree with what's being taught, right? And but the person never contacted me, and I stated my telephone number. I don't mind constructive criticism. It's just like last night when I was teaching and I said, why we are Old Testament? And somebody typed in, I'm not Old Testament, I'm Original Testament. I cannot disagree with that. I understand the point. So my point is, I'm not one to sit there and to be one who doesn't want to hear constructive criticism. So that's just what that is with that. Want to apologize for the tardiness. Tried to sit there and get the PowerPoint started up. Took a little break, had something to drink, and so forth. This is the matter in this particular regard. Josephus matter. This is a presentation being brought to you from the congregation Shema Yisrael, a camp located in Brooklyn, New York. My brother Josiah Ben Levi is my assistant, and periodically will be reading things out of the scriptures. All right? So just want that to be noted. Okay? Yeah, you would have those who would sit there and actually create fake YouTube accounts or so forth and so on, just to sit there and get their little rocks off, if you will, or get their 2 cents on, or like when I did the thing called the smashing of the synagogue of Satan with some brothers who happen to even be which is deemed as messianic. One of the people in there said, this loud, obnoxious Hebrew just want to sit there and say certain things. And so I sat there and went back and forth with the person, or should I say I went back but not forth, with the person in Hebrew and just said, well, if I have something that I stated I was incorrect, let me know. No, the person just wanted to get their little 2 cents in, so that way I could just sit there and like, look, I poked something. See, Proverbs talks about that kind of character as of people. You understand? When you read in the book of Proverbs, when it says they do not rest unless they make something to fall. All they do is just sit there and just try to take shots and disrespect, take shots and disrespect. You understand? When you notice, most of us, we don't go on other people's channels to try to sit there and go back and forth with that. We have no time for that. We're trying to build our thing, be it online or be it in person, once it comes down to dealing with something such as the Goshen thing in Georgia, or the situation we're maintaining a camp here in New York. So we don't have time to try to follow somebody else's channel as a troll. All right? We don't do that. There are trolls, even on my own personal channel. We know that there's people who make up names and then try to follow along. And, I know of people who told me when I contacted them what I'm teaching and talking about, but they never sit there and call me, compliment, give constructive criticism or nothing. You waited for me to reach out to you as a brother to say shalom in order for you to sit there and reach out to me. That doesn't make any kind of sense. Leviticus chapter 19 in Torah, it says, you shall surely rebuke your neighbor. So you don't need to sit there and wait for me if I'm in the need to be corrected on something. Why are you sitting there waiting for me to reach out to you and then for you to say you wanted to talk to me about something? No, you didn't. If you wanted to talk to me about something, you would have talked to me about something. That means if I never reached out, you would have never sat there and gave me what? Constructive criticism or tough love? No. That right there is just absolutely fake. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? But such is life. But yes, on the internet, online, I saw the comments and so forth. You're going to have those who generally have no kind of understanding or agreement and can take time, not being funny, on a so-called Sunday in the morning and just want to sit there and just disagree. I have no time on a so-called Sunday morning to sit there and debate what I disagree with. I'm trying to present what I agree with and what I'm teaching on. I don't have the time to sit there and go back and forth with what I disagree with early in the morning. It's too early in the morning, too early in the week for that. All right? But that's just something we just want to point out in that regard. So now let's go on in this particular teaching right here. Giving due respect on a human level, as stated, Nasi Zipor, Nasi Natan El, my beautiful brother and friend, as well as our elder, well, our chief Nathanael of the tribe of Lewi, and is actually his son. That's my assistant in the reading here. All right. Luya says, Josephus matter. Now, this is coming out of the book of Josephus, and it says this. And now, since his soldiers were already quite tired with killing men, and yet there appeared to be a vast multitude still remaining alive, Caesar gave orders that they should kill none but those that were in arms and oppose them, but should take the rest alive. But together with those whom they had orders to slay, they slew the aged and the infirm. Next slide, please. So this Fronto slew all those who had been seditious and robbers, who were impeached one by another. But the young men he chose out of the tallest and most beautiful, and reserved them for the triumph. And as for the rest of the multitude that were above 17 years old, he put them in bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. So what is the point in going over this particular part? Is when it says what? They were put in bonds, not ships, and sent to the Egyptian mines. This is coming out of the book of Josephus, as we went over before. Titus also sent a great number into the provinces as a present to them. That means they were scattered more than just the literal land of Egypt in Northeast Africa. All right, next slide. Thank you. Says this. Now, at the same time, Titus Caesar lay at the siege of Jerusalem. Did Vespasian go on board a merchant ship and sailed from Alexandria to Rhodes, whence he sailed away in ships with 3 rows of oars. And as he touched at several cities that lay in his road, he was joyfully received by them all, and so passed over from Ionia into Greece, whence he set sail from Corcyra to the promontory of Lapix. Now, the point in going over this, brothers and sisters, is to let it be noted and understood when Vespasian was going against a guy named Vatilians of Rome for the emperor title, you had it to where Titus, the son of Vespasian, was left to sit there and besiege Jerusalem. All right, so we just want this to be pointed out for edification purposes. Now, one of the things we want to talk about real quick to dispel a myth is somebody was saying the Negroes would never be Israelites, supposedly. But when you go into the same historian named Tacitus, he described the Jews as coming out of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a Greek word, ethien and opt, which means burnt face. So in the time of Titus of Rome, in the time of Tacitus of Rome, the Jews were mistaken as being from the land of burnt faces. So anybody talking about the Negroes cannot be Israel, you need to sit there and may want to get your studying done. All right, so we want this to be noted for edification purposes. Go into the book of Tacitus, the Roman historian, book 5 on the Jews. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. Now, it goes on to say to the left-hand side, but as for Titus, he marched from that Caesarea, which lay on the seaside, and came to that which is called Caesarea Philippi, and stayed there a considerable time. Now, when you look at the part on the right-hand side, you see where it says Caesarea Philippi on the orange part there, on the part next to where it says Phoenicia, and it going from one part all the way to the other. All right. So he went from Caesarea Philippi to Caesarea, which is over in the blue part where it says Samaria, by where the sea is at on the map. So this is something we just want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. It says this: distance matter again. The distance from Caesarea to Caesarea Philippi is a little over 88 miles. Josephus, book of the Wars 7, chapter 2, while Titus was at Caesarea, all right, he solemnized the birthday of his brother Domitian after a splendid manner, and inflicted a great deal of the punishment intended for the Jews in honor of him. For the number of those that were now slain and fighting with the beast and were burnt and fought one with another exceeded 2,500. So when you go back into the sad portion of Jeremiah chapter 15, when it says such as for death to death, such as for the sword to the sword, such as for famine to the famine. This is why we read that earlier today in this presentation part 3. This being presentation part 4. All right, so we can gain an understanding. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, it says there, Titus burnt Hebrews and some others did too. What you're looking at on the left-hand side is a man in the southern United States that was lynched and stripped. And now what you're looking at on the right-hand side is a man that was also burnt by the descendants of those of the Romans, by the descendants of those of the Europeans. So these are things you just want to point out for edification purposes. Not much different in the lynch days than what was going on back then in that particular regard. Now, not trying to be quote unquote racial, but we want to get into this point right here, brothers and sisters, and that's this. When you look at the so-called Jewish man, he's a very, very vindictive man, a very, very vindictive group of people. They incarcerated a man that was over 90 years old because he was found guilty of Nazi war crimes. I want this to be pointed out. Somebody said, don't hate, appreciate. Well, I want to state this to that. It says open hatred is better than secret love. So I welcome the hate, if you will. I want to know what people sit back and think. I don't even mind what may be considered and understood as constructive criticism. Let it come. You understand? So everyone is not going to feel everything. Sometimes people may click a dislike for whatever reason. Some people may disagree for whatever reason, but we want to sit there and let our points be noted for edification purposes. All right. So as stated, it says open hatred is better than secret love. So we want to keep it in layman terms real in that regard. Now, another thing we want to get into is this. The European Jew, if you will, being a very vindictive individual who had, as stated, a man that was over 90 years old. They didn't give him clemency or pardon or anything of that sort. He sat there and was incarcerated over the age of 90 for being part of the Nazis. So now if the European Jews are the descendants of the Israelites that was afflicted by the Romans, why are they not trying to find the family of Titus and the family of Vespasian and the family of Claudius and the family of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids of Greece? It's because they know good and well who is who. They can't feel for the ancient house of Israel afflicted by the Romans because they are not descendants of the house of ancient Israel. That's why they can't feel that energy or that anger or that frustration or that aspect. They can't. Right, the sadness, they can't feel that. Just like the European today, when they talk about black people, oh, just get over slavery, because you are not the slaves in the South. You are not the slaves in the West Indies. That's why it's not easy for you to sit there and understand the situations, comments of those who are afflicted or descendant of such. I am what you would call a so-called black man, right? The Japanese in history used to afflict and persecute the Chinese. I will be out of my mind to tell a Chinese man just to get over it. You understand? That has nothing to do with the black man. Why will I, as a person who's neither Japanese nor Chinese, try to butt my nose into the aspect of their particular problem in their particular history and sit there and tell the Chinese man, oh, just get over it? I'm neither the victim nor the oppressor between the Japanese and the Chinese. It's just like when a black man went to Vietnam and they used to capture a brother during the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s and say, look, this is not your war, mind your business. You understand? So that's what I got to say to the people who tell black people just get over slavery when you're not the descendants of those who are oppressed. Mind your business. All right? So it says there, Titus burnt Hebrews and some others did too. So this is what we want to point out for edification purposes. You can get these pictures from a book called Without Sanctuary. That's the name of the book I got that from. It's called Without Sanctuary. All right. I want to sit there and type that in so we can begin to see what that's talking about. Without Sanctuary. All right. And in that book is where I got these particular pictures from. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. It says Titus went by land until going to Rome. Josephus, Book of the Wars of the Jews, Book 7, Chapter 5, verse 2 and 3. It lets us know that Titus began to go to Egypt and pass over the desert very suddenly, then took up the resolution to go to Rome by sea. All right. Then it goes on to say, he, Titus, went from Syria to Antioch to the Euphrates, then back to Antioch while he was on his way to Egypt. So Titus took the journey he intended into Egypt and passed over the desert very suddenly. Why do I keep saying that? Is because the argument given is no, Titus wouldn't go over the Sinai. It would be easier for them to go by sea. Okay. And came to Alexandria and took up the resolution to go to Rome by sea. See, you can't go the quickest way to get to Rome over the Mediterranean or by the Mediterranean from Egypt on land. So you will have to go, since we're speaking of the Mediterranean, after that particular aspect. That's something to be pointed out for evidence purposes. Next slide. Thank you. Map according to Hebrew thought, primitive thought. It says in Deuteronomy 28, the Lord will bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as the eagle swoopeth down, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, that shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Now, the map that you're seeing right there is generally an understanding of how the Hebrews saw the world from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So you had Ham over in Africa, Shem in Asia, in that area there, now referred to as the Middle East, and Japheth over there by Indo-European and European lands. Why does that become important? Because it says, as the eagle swoops down from the ends of the earth. From the ends of the earth is talking about where Japheth was at. The Gentile nations. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? Josephus in Hebrew thought. It says Japheth, the son of Noah, had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning in the mountains of Taurus and Armanus, they proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tensis and came along Europe to Cadiz and settling themselves on the lands which they light upon, which none had inhabited before, they called the nations after their own names. The Tennis River is the Don River of today. The Taurus Mountain is by modern Turkey. The same of the Armanus Mountains. Cadiz is a port in Spain. Yes, Europe. So these are things we want to point out. And this is coming, brothers and sisters, out of the book of Josephus, where it speaks about the lands where Japheth inhabited. All right. From where Turkey is at in the north part of that place, all the way to Cadiz, which is Spain. So we want that to be noted for edification purposes. Next slide, please. Thank you. The definition of Japheth. Many are under the impression that Japheth means beautiful or pretty. Yet that is not the meaning of the word Japheth. Japheth from the Hebrew, Yephet or Yaphet, is not from the Hebrew, Yapa or Yafa for pretty. The definition of Japheth is deceiver or enticer. The root of it comes from the Hebrew pata, meaning to deceive. All right? So we want that to be noted for edification purposes. Next slide, please. Thank you. Genesis 9:27. God enlarged Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be their servant. All right, it says this. Yaft Elohim leyefet, wayishkon ba'ahale Shem, wehi kena'an ebed lamo. The word for enlarge in Hebrew is hagdal, from the root word gadal. Japheth in the tents of Shem is an example, such as the Medes who are of Japheth's seed in collaboration with the Persians. So we want this to be noted for edification purposes. It is not linguistically saying God enlarged Japheth, but more so God entice or persuade Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. That's what that's talking about in that particular regard. Next slide, please. All right. The Japhet matter in Jeremiah chapter 5. We see, according to Josephus, that Japhet was in the lands currently called Europe. The Israelites were not in touch or much contact with the Japhetic nations of old until the era of the Phoenicians, who were both Shem and Ham and doing business with Japhet. Another part says this in Jeremiah chapter 5. Behold, lo, I will bring a nation upon you from far, O house of Yisrael, saith Jehovah. It is an enduring nation. It is an ancient nation, a nation whose language thou knowest not, neither understandest what they say. And it shall come to pass when you shall say, wherefore hath Jehovah Eloheinu, the Lord our God, done all these things unto us? Then shalt thou say unto them, like as ye have forsaken me and served strange gods in your land, so shall you serve strangers in the land that's not yours. So that shows that the Jewish man cannot be the house of Israel biblically. They are not the biblical Israelites by their own admission, if you're reading the scriptures, because we always kept the laws. We kept the laws and we was always in the traditions. If that was the case, then you ain't the people Jeremiah was talking to. So you, in your own arrogance, in the pride of your heart, Esau beguiled you to where you done made a fool of yourself and saying, we've always kept the laws, as if that's supposed to make you the people. Keeping the law don't make you the house of Yisrael. Keeping the laws make you righteous, not Yisrael. You see, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide, please. Thank you. The people who besieged Jerusalem and the lands around it after the time of Jeremiah and Ezekiel were the Japhetic nations, the people of the Greeks and the Romans. Now, Ezekiel chapter 7 says this, and as for the beauty of their ornament, which was set for a pride, they made the images of their abominations and their detestable things thereof. Therefore have I made it unto them as an unclean thing, and I will give it into the hands of the strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil, and they shall profane it. So we just want that to be noted. I'm going to ask the brother to go into the Apocrypha, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. Because the next people to attack the house of Israel, namely in Jerusalem, after the prophet Jeremiah and Ezekiel, brothers and sisters, was the Greeks. The Medes and the Persians did not attack the Israelites. They did two-faced aspect of trying to help. But as far as attacking, they didn't do it in that particular regard. So let's see what this is talking about in Ezekiel 7. Give me the book of the Apocrypha, First Maccabees chapter 1. Thank you.
Hallelujah. And it happened after all that Alexander, son of Philip, and Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim.
Now, Kittim was a city-state in Greece, and Kittim was a grandson of Japhet through Javan. All right, he was a Greek, or Macedonia, which is adjacent to such. Read on.
Chittim had smitten Darius, king of Persians, and Medes, that he resigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
All right, so after he slew Darius III, Commodius of the Persians, who also ruled in Egypt, it says that he reigned in his place. Read on.
And made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew kings of the earth, and went to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up, and he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became true tributaries, tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick, and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them, while he was yet alive. 7. First Maccabees. Hallelujah. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them. Many years and evils were multiplied in the earth.
So now, when it says, brothers and sisters, now I will give it into the hands of the strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil. Not too hard to figure what that's talking about. It talks about what happened with the Greeks and then later on with the Romans among the Israelites. Now go to First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 31. Thank you so much.
Hallelujah. Verse 31, family. Wherefore, whoa, Slika, low. That's not it.
Yeah, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 31. Thank you.
And when he had taken spoils of the city, he set it on fire and put down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle.
All right. Possessing the cattle of the Israelites is part of the curses that Deuteronomy 28 spoke of. Pulling down the walls on every side is part of the curses that we read of in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. All these curses shall pursue thee and overtake thee, because Yisrael did not keep the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. This is something we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right. So it said that it was given to him for a spoil. They took the spoils of the house of Israel. And what did they do with it? Kept it among themselves. All right. Next slide. Thank you. It says from Rome to Jerusalem, from Greece to Jerusalem. On the left-hand side, you see a map showing how one be able to go from Rome going north in Italy, then going down west of Romania, going over by Greece, crossing the water into Turkey, then going from there down to where Jerusalem is. All right. And then from Greece to Jerusalem. So, which is actually a bit more complex going by the water aspect, if that be the case, in which one can go from where Greece is to where Jerusalem is. All right. So this is something we want to point out for reference purposes. When you look at this right here, these are part of what is talked about when it said by the ends of the earth in Deuteronomy chapter 28. All right. So next slide. Thank you. It says Joel 3 in the Hebrew thought. For behold, in those days and in that time when I will bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and divided my land. So this is something we want to point out for reason and purposes. It says, behold, in those days will he bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. That has not come to pass yet, brothers and sisters. I state again, that has not come to pass yet. I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, which they have scattered among the nations, from one of the earth even to the other end, and divided the land. Basically, now you're talking about the Gaza Strip. You got Jordan separated from the rest of the place and so forth and so on. Wasn't like that back in the days of ancient world. All right, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes when it says they divided my land. Joel chapter 3 in Hebrew thought. It says, and they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine, and have drunk. And also, what are ye to me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the regions of Philistia, where you render retribution on my behalf? And if you render retribution on my behalf, swiftly, speedily will I return the retribution upon your own head. So what that's talking about right there, they have cast lots for my people, meaning cast lot for the house of Israel. Well, which nation is going to sit there and take over, and which nation is going to be the one to occupy the land of Israel after? Because we have to remember something. When Jerusalem was made into heaps and the land of Israel was left vacant of the true Israelites, it tells you in Ezekiel that Edom and the residue of the nations are the people who came and occupied where Israel was at. This is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So now, when it speaks about Zidon, that's the Zidonians, and the regions of Philistia, when you render retribution on my behalf, and if you render retribution on my behalf, swiftly, speedily will I return your retribution upon your own head. So, in other words, all the people of the Hamites that was in the land of what we understand as Israel in the ancient world, they're not going to sit there and be able, brothers and sisters, to give a retribution. Next slide, please. Thank you. Joel chapter 3 and Hebrew thought. For as much as ye have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly treasures, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the sons of the Grecians, that ye might move them far from their border. So when we went over before last night in regards to the munter thing, and I asked what happened to the descendants of those who were sold in Gaza, as well as those who were sold in Hebron, I'm going to have to ask this question right here. What happened to the descendants of those that were sold to the Greeks? See, the point in mentioning that is because those kind of key points right there shut down the teaching and the ideology of 70 AD being the end of the house of Israel. All right? Going on into the next part. The explanation. The Israelites were sold by certain Hamite nations to the Greeks. They were the African nation selling Israelites to the whites in layman terms. The Apocrypha, First Maccabees, speaks of Alexander coming from the land of Kittim. We know that Kittim is the son of Javan. We know that Kittim is the son of Javan as Tarshish is. Javan is the Grecians. According to Grun, all right, in his book entitled Timetables of World History, it says this. It was the Greeks that later inhabited what is Spain today. So the Spaniard is a descendant of the Greek. All right. So this becomes important for later as we go along in this presentation. The Israelites, next slide, thank you. The Israelites were scattered from their land before, during, and after the Greek Empire. Goes on to say, when the Greek Empire fell, the Romans took over as noted. The Roman historian mentioned before, Tacitus, speaks of the fact that the Israelites were thought of as Ethiopians. Also, when we were shipped here to the Western Hemisphere, we were called Ethiopians by the white man. All right? Yes, I'm getting to the stage now to go in. Let's go in, brothers and sisters. Next slide. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. We read that the Israelites will be the tail and not the head, will borrow and not lend, will be under a people whose language they did not know, will be scattered from one end of the earth to the other, will be mad for the things that their eyes see. Let's explain what we're talking about. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. The Lord, Yah, will smite thee with madness and with blindness, and there was astonishment of heart. Madness means crazy. We packed the mental institutions in the era from the 1920s until the 1960s. And thou shalt grope at noonday, like the blind gropeth about in darkness. And thou shalt not prosper thou shalt not make thy ways prosperous, but thou shalt only be oppressed and robbed always, and there shall be none to save thee. Blindness, blind to the history, culture, land, language of one's people. All right? Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 11 says this. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is lost. We are clean cut off. That's Ezekiel 37 in regards to the valley of dry bones. There's no way in the world you're going to look at Jewish history and say that that's them. Not going to be able to do that one. All right. So it says what? Our bones are dried up and our hope is lost. We are clean cut off, meaning clean cut off from your land, clean cut off from your culture, clean cut off from your roots, clean cut off from your everything. Like in the movie Roots, when the guy who was playing Kunta, John Amos, is noted as saying concerning the slave master, they don't leave us. All right. So Deuteronomy 28, the roar. And thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness. And thou shalt not make thy ways prosperous. And thou shalt only be oppressed and robbed all way. And there shall be none to save thee. Grope at noonday. Grope, to search blindly with hands, with uncertainty. What are you doing? What goals do you have? Ain't you know what for the N word here, you heard? And these are the kind of things that we want to talk about for edification purposes. All right? Okay, next slide, please. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. All right? Clifford Hall will go to jail for 6 months for paying too much for his son after overpaying child support and seeing his son too often. Now, that's a case that you can actually look up when it says about being driven mad for the things your eyes see. A man will be incarcerated for doing too much for his son as in overpaying in child support. All right, let's go on. Mr. Scott eventually spent 2 weeks in jail, a stint that cost him a $35,000 a year job at a filmmaking company and sent him into isolation and alcohol abuse. He told the Post and Courier, I got mad at everybody in the whole world because I just lost the best job I ever had, he said. I just stopped doing everything. So now, going back when it says, and thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness, and shall not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt only be oppressed and robbed always, and there shall be none to save thee. So when we go back, and it says, Yah will smite thee with madness and blindness and with astonishment of heart. Then going back to Mr. Scott in the newspaper, it says, I got mad at everybody in the whole world because I just lost the best job I ever had. The point in this showing the roar is to show how we are the people that unfortunately fit the curses of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb and a byword among all the peoples where Jehovah shall lead thee away. L'shama, for an astonishment. You still want to fight in their wars, date their women, and still say, let's hold hands. A byword, from nigger to African American, a name in place of your true name. Bishnina. So these are things we just want to go over in this particular regard. Next slide, please. And it says this, Deuteronomy 28, the roar. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build the house and shall not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard and shall not use the fruit thereof. A lady by the name of Macmillan in her book entitled Why Black Men Choose White Women stated the following. In slavery, the black man will be told, your wife has some good P word. All right. Hugh Thomas, in his book, The Slave Trade, spoke about how blacks were used to build houses in Pennsylvania. So in the 1680s, brothers and sisters, we had it to where there were black people building houses in Pennsylvania. But it says, you shall build a house and shall not dwell therein. You shall plant a vineyard and shall not use the fruit thereof. We're going to show that in a second. Also says what? And thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. So these are the things we want to talk about for edification purposes. It says what? Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt plant a vineyard and not use the fruit thereof. Brothers and sisters, in physical slavery times, they used to put a mask on the face as shown there, where you cannot sit there and pick up the things and eat according to such. They used to put and muzzle us from the things that we were growing in the plantations, as shown in that particular regard. All right. And then when you look on the the other side of it, where the woman actually has, as shown, a yoke of iron upon her neck. These are things we want to show the prophecy on how that particular thing happened. All right. It says, these curses shall pursue and overtake thee. Let's go on. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and that I shall look and fare with longing for them all the day, and this shall be done in the power of your hand. What you're looking at here is the case of real life portrayed in a movie, Boys in the Hood, in which the boy, Doughboy, as he was called there, played by Ice Cube later on in the movie, the rapper, is being shown handcuffed and taken away, and your sons and your daughters shall be given to another people, such as law enforcement, and that I shall look and fare with longing for them all the day, and this shall be not in the power of your hand. So many people may say, well, that happens to many people, and so forth and so on. You are going to have to explain the history of your people and show how it connects to Deuteronomy 28. 1 or 2 verses there doesn't show the aspect of it. You're going to have to be able to explain the ships, the captivity, the broken families, the aspect of people not wanting to get along, groping at noonday, being robbed and spoiled always. These are things you're going to have to sit there and speak about, because one of the arguments given to what they call the black Hebrew Israelites is, well, there were other people taking in ships, but the aspect of the Turkish people taking the Russian women in ships as slaves, those people are still not being oppressed all way. They were able to comfortably, quote unquote, get over the enslavement. We are still under the oppression of our oppressors. So it's a different aspect. All right. So we want that to be pointed out for edification purposes. Amos chapter 7, verse 17. Therefore, thus saith Yah, thy wife shall be a harlot in the city, and thy sons and thy daughters shall fall by the sword, and thy land shall be divided by 9, and thou thyself shall die in an unclean land, and Yisrael shall surely be led away captive out of his land. So what are we talking about? One more thing to point out is that the house of Israel did not end in 70 AD. Okay, a Christian apologist. Now in Amos chapter 7, verse 17, when it says your sons and your daughters shall fall by the sword, here we see, as was shown in the news and in the street, where one case here, Michael Brown in the Midwest getting shot by a European cop and so forth and so on for supposedly having stole something or supposedly messing with him. Meanwhile, the man had no weapon himself. So these are things we just want to show for edification purposes and reason. Your sons and your daughters shall fall by the sword. So don't sit there and come with something about, well, it ended with Titus. No, it did not end with Titus. Okay, Amos chapter 7, verse 17, next slide. And it says this, therefore, thus saith Yah, thy wife shall be a harlot in the city, and thy sons and thy daughters shall fall by the sword. What you're looking at on the other side is a picture of multitudes, and there's more of black men and women who are killed by the police. That's what you're looking at right there. That whole basic camouflage aspect, or big collage, if you want to say, pardon me, I meant to say big collage of just our people slain by the police department inside of this place here. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Just this year, there was a cop that got in trouble because he was recorded as saying to a white woman, oh, don't worry about that, we only shoot black people. That been on the news. Do you know how many times when it says you shall be oppressed, how many cops done sat there and been busted for trying to plant drugs on brothers when they were searching them? These are the things that we're talking about. And as we read earlier in part 3 of this, it says you shall have no power to stand before your enemies. So what is the solution? Return to the Most High. Stop trying to have a party in a time in which you're under persecution. All right. Amos chapter 7, verse 17, next slide. And it says this, therefore, thus saith Yah, thy wife shall be a harlot in the city, and thy sons and thy daughters shall fall by the sword, and thy land shall be divided by 9, and thou thyself shalt die in the unclean land, and Yisrael shall surely be led away captive out of his land. Unclean land. They don't let the land rest. They work the land constantly. They soak the land with blood. They die in the land after eating that which is not clean. Their holidays are based on dying in an unclean land. That's what we are going through in this particular time, dying in an unclean land that is not given rest, that is not being able to keep a Shabbat, that is not able to sit there and replenish itself. This is the land that we're dying in this particular regard, be it through diet or through deeds. Next slide, please. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. So that thou shalt be driven mad for the sight which thine eyes shall see. Now, what you're looking at there on the right-hand side is also depicted from the movie Boys in the Hood, in which the guy was basically in part losing his mind due to the situations that we as a people deal with in this particular aspect. All right? So don't tell me that Israel ended in 70 AD. Can't come with that one. Next slide, please. Deuteronomy chapter 28, the roar. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear night and day, and shall have no assurance of thy life. Now, what you're looking at here is also from the movie depicting unfortunate reality life in our neighborhood, in our black people neighborhood, where the guy you see there with a double-barrel shotgun outside the window in a red car. The red car in the movie represent that they was part of the blood gang. All right, that's one of the things you point out in that regard. So in that particular case, when the guy rolled up on him, he said, Mark. Mark means that they have you marked for death. That's what that's talking about in that particular regard. All right. And it says, and thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear night and day, and have no assurance of your life. That is in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, so we can gain an understanding of the prophecies that it's talking about. All right. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear night and day, and shall have no assurance of your life. Flying bullets, murders, 2015, 2014, 161, 145. Shootings, 542, 511. Shooting victims, 633, 594. NYPD crime status through Sunday. You know that was done based in Brooklyn alone. My cousin got killed in Brooklyn. You understand? So just want that to be noted for edification purposes. Everybody knows. They even show you in the movie, what's it, American History X or some movie of that sort, when they said, excuse my language, the niggas are ready. They practice on themselves every night for war. Everybody knows we shoot one another. Everybody knows that we don't love one another. Everybody knows that a brother will put two in your head before somebody else will. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Go on to the next slide. Thank you. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. The man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil against his brother and against his wife, the wife of his bosom, and against the remnant of his children whom he hath remaining. What you're looking at is a commercial in part based in California among the Bloods and the Crips, where they was just showing step up, boom, drop dead. Step up, boom, drop dead. Step up, boom, drop dead. And this is something that has been going on in that particular regard. All right. There were over 20,000, maybe even more than that for certain, since the Bloods and Crips started under what they called the OG Bloods and so forth and so on, in the era with Tukey, since they started that stuff in the 70s to today. The amount of death toll has been high. His eye shall be evil against his brother and against the wife of his bosom. This is why you find unfortunate aspects of them saying, well, I do love you, but I beat you. As we went over before, you're not supposed to be beating up on your wife. No, that's not the way of Israel. All right. So we want that to be noted for edification purposes. All right. Then it goes on to say, Deuteronomy 28, the roar. The man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil against his brother and against the wife of his bosom and against the remnant of his children whom he hath remaining. Goes on to say here, Darren Broswell Johnson, age 25, reportedly confessed to the murders after becoming angry over $600 monthly child support that he was ordered to pay. This is a person who killed both the child and the mother of the child when he had to sit there and pay $600 a month in child support. His eyes shall be evil against his son and against his daughter and against the wife of his bosom. So these are things that we want to sit there and speak upon in this particular aspect. Next slide, please. Thank you. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. See, these are things that they're not going to want to talk about when they want to speak about Munter, the Roman historian. We're going to show the Negroes in this. Okay, it says this in part: the tender and delicate women among you who will not adventure to set the soul of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness. Her eye shall be evil against the husband of her bosom, and against her son, and against her daughter. The Jewish man claiming this? What do you think, Brother Josiah? You think the Jewish man claiming this as his history and legacy and his unfortunate plight?
Low.
He's not, is he? What do they say? We've always kept the laws of Hashem. The book of Isaiah says the daughter of Zion is left as a besieged city. Is the Jewish women left as a besieged city, or is black women left as a besieged city? Do Jewish women sit there and say they don't want to deal with Jewish men, or do black women say niggas ain't you know what? Do you find Jewish women saying that Jewish men ain't nothing but penises and dogs, or do they find black women saying niggas ain't penises and dogs? Do they find their, you understand? I'm just speaking upon the particular aspect. All right. So now what you're looking at here is a lady named Rashida Lucas, who in divorce court, all right, is noted as sitting up there and saying that the man that she was with was too nice to her, cooking for her, cleaning for her. And so they was going to have a divorce because she just couldn't deal with this man that was just too nice. Brothers and sisters, it says what? Her eyes shall be evil against the husband of her bosom. And in that particular one, they were referring to that as the most ungrateful woman alive. And so these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. If you hear many of the complaints, a lot of sisters, and I want to speak for the brothers to the sisters right now, because a lot of times when we speak as brothers, it's, why don't you talk about, or when we speak as brothers in regard to certain things, what happens? It says what? Why don't you just talk about the brothers? Why don't you talk about the brothers? Why won't the brothers this? And why won't the brothers that? Well, sister, why won't we as brothers and sisters, as we say in the prayers, talwe akla akle akotla akota, will you unite or will you join brother to brother and sister to sister? Why won't we all come together and sit there and come together as a mishpachah, as a family? As opposed to when the brothers do speak their mind about things that have been on their heart for X amount of years, X amount of decades. Oh, just shut up, nigger. Just be quiet. Stop B-wording. All right? That's in the past and so forth and so on. So these are things we want to sit there and talk about for edification purposes. Now, I want to say something as a brother to the sisters. The things that you are seeing, such as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and they just want to get on the sisters. Oh my gosh. No other man on earth sits there and talks about the women of their own people. It's because the white man, the Chinese man, wasn't told to shut up, little nigga. See, the black man's been silenced for decades. So now when you see a free market to be able to speak via Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, sisters are going to wind up, unfortunately, hearing things that they did not know brothers felt for a long time. Because in many cases, father was not in the house. Mommy was mommy and daddy. She sat there, in many cases, disrespected verbally the father to the son, and so forth and so on. So he's been told, well, I can't say nothing. If you're going to be a street sweeper, just be the best one at it. Okay, I'll just be a street sweeper. Brothers and sisters, a woman cannot make a boy a man. Only thing she can do is teach him how to be nice and respectful to a woman. But as far as doing things and handling things as a man, that doesn't include a woman. A woman, a mother cannot teach her son that. But we know they broke up the family, and we continue in that particular breaking up of the family. So these are things we want to talk about for edification purposes. I want to emphasize again, due to years and decades of the black man being told, little nigga, shut up, stop B-wording. I don't want to use profanity. All right. Stop complaining, suck it up, man up. Everybody is eventually is going to want to be able to speak his or her mind. But we've been silenced for so long as a man. This is why when the Muslim woman named Shahrazad Ali came out with her book in 1990, The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman, she wound up making so much money and revenue on it because brothers began to sit there and see, finally, one understands what we're saying. Am I agreeing with everything that she stated in her book? No. But one of the things I'm stating, brothers and sisters, as a brother speaking to the sisters, is what brothers want more so than sexuality is an ear to be able to be heard. But we've been told that, well, I'm not going to sit there and enable him. I'm not going to sit there and compliment a fist for swimming. Brothers and sisters, do you know what the word ego means? It's a Latin word meaning I, like self. Ego, I want to put this in the chat. Ego means I in Latin. It means speaking of self. But what we've been told, oh, you just want someone to stroke your ego. Who else is going to make the man feel good besides the woman? She got to come with something more than a vagina. We want to speak upon that in that particular regard. You understand? So when somebody breaks down and transforms and be able to explain that ego means self-esteem, look it up inside of the American College Dictionary. The word ego means self-esteem. So when they sit there and tell you deep down, oh, it's just your ego, they don't want you to have no self-esteem. When a so-called black woman tells a brother, tells a black man, well, I love everyone. I see everyone as the same. What she is saying essentially is what? Nigga, you ain't special. You understand? Proverbs chapter 31, speaking about the husband and the wife aspect, it says that a man says to his wife, many daughters have done wonderful, but thou excellest them all. So why is it that some sisters have a problem telling her man, telling a brother that he is better than the other men? Sometimes you may just want to hear that. It doesn't make you any less of a man. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. But what we've been told, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Let's look at that scenario, dummy. How can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps? My grandfather, I'm not trying to call him a dummy, used to say things of that sort. But let's look at the statement, not that they're dummies for saying it, but it is a dumb statement. How can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps? In order to get to your boot, you are bent over already, holding on to something. So how can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you're still not reaching for the stars, but digging for your feet? These are the things that just goes to show how we have been manipulated and disrespected. These are the little things like that. You know, as females say, oh, it's the little things that count. There's nothing wrong with telling somebody that they're special. But if you saw the movie, A Family That Prays, you begin to see. There's a movie called A Family That Prays. And it's not talking about prayer, it's talking about praise like praying on people. You'll begin to see how some brothers do view some sisters. This is why one of the things I attempt to say before the Most High, Talwe Akla Akotla Akota, will you join man, will you join brother to brother and sister to sister? Because the brotherhood and the sisterhood among our people in most cases is not solid, it's not tight, it's not good. All right, and it trickles down to the next generation. And it becomes what Isaiah 1 talks about when it says, "I see the evildoers." So you got one generation, then the next generation, then the next generation, then the next generation that wound up falling off. Israel forgot their resting place. The ox know his owner, and the donkey his master's crib, but Yisrael doth not know. My people do not consider. Will a Jewish man ever lay claim to not being considerate of God? Or do they say they always keep the laws of Hashem? Or do we sit there and say since the 60s and before, we need to get back on track with the Most High? Next slide. Thank you. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will Yahweh bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. According to Phyllis Bouch in her book, Prescription for Nutritional Healing, Black people are the highest case of HIV/AIDS cases is us. All right. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. It says also every sickness and every plague that is not written in this book, in the book of this law, them will Yahweh bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. Everybody knows who has the highest cases of the STDs is us. We make less than 5% of the economy in this country, but are the biggest consumers. That's part of another plague. Not even loving and trusting one another, as well as the physical STDs. We have a mental transmitted disease as well. So they may not be a legal term, MTD, but in this presentation, we're going to talk about STD and MTD. MTD is a mental transferred disease. And that is, I'm not buying from my people. I'm not trusting my people, because if I sit there and do business with my people, what is that going to sit there and say is what? I'm racist. If I support Black people, then I'm known as a racist. If I support heterosexuality, then I'm known as a bigot. Well, I guess you're just going to have to call me your man-made terms, because Moreh Yeshaya is heterosexual and for his people. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? It says what? Next slide. Thank you. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. And you shall be left few in number, whereas you as the stars of heaven for multitude, because you did not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Black people make up less than 13% of the population in the United States. In the West Indies, where the majority of the people are Black, many still are the tail and not the head. The Chinese and the white people still run the economy in those places, such as Barbados, such as in Jamaica. These are things we want to point out for edification purposes. The stranger that is in the midst of thee shall mount above thee higher and higher. How does the Chinese man come into Jamaica and get more businesses than some of the people that been in there since the era of Nanny Cujo, Leonard Parkinson, and Daddy Sharp with the Maroons? I'm talking to my family from Jamaica. How does that happen? How do they come from China and get more businesses and taking over the economy in Kingston? How does that happen? How is the West Indian money still subject to the tariff of Great Britain and all of that, and England and so forth? How does that happen? How are the people in Haiti free? Meanwhile, they're still paying France every year for doing what happened since the era of Toussaint Louverture. I'm talking to my family in the Caribbean. We ain't forget y'all, because to be quite candid, some of our best teachers came out the Caribbean. Rabbi Matthew came from the Caribbean. My first teacher, Moreh Yosef, came from the Virgin Islands. He wasn't from Harlem. And I'm only saying that because that's the history his sons taught me. So we want to point that out for edification purposes. The Black revolutionaries doing the aspect of what happened in slavery in North America is fueled by what they heard happen in the islands. I'll state that again. When they heard about the slave uprisings in Jamaica and in Haiti, they said, well, we in North Carolina can do it too. This is what we want to point out. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. Deuteronomy 28, the roar. And among these nations, thou shalt have no repose, and there shall be no rest for the sole of your foot. Brother Josiah, can you read what I just read right here? All right. And among these nations, thou shalt have no repose. Read that, please.
And among these nations, thou shalt have no repose.
And among the Romans, thou shalt have no repose. What does it say?
And among these nations.
But they're going to tell us it's the Romans. So let's see. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 65. Because they're saying that Deuteronomy chapter 28, from verse 48 to verse 68, is only about the Israelites and the Romans. So let's see. It says, and among these nations thou shalt have no repose. So does it say on among the Romans? Am I misreading? I'm not misreading, right? Okay, give me the Hebrew there. Turn to Deuteronomy 28 in what they call the Stone Edition Tanakh, so we can sit there and see what it says in Hebrew. Maybe it says Romi as Rome. Maybe it says B'nai Yafet only as the aspect speaking in that particular regard of that. Let's see what it says in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 65 in the Hebrew. Okay, thank you, my brother. And it says what? Hallelujah. Now, Deuteronomy 28, verse 65. And here is what we read in the Hebrew. And it says the following. Uba goyim hahem. And among these nations. So how are you going to say that Deuteronomy 28 from verse 48 to verse 68, which must be inclusive of verse 65, is only of the Israelites and the Romans, unless you're trying to cut Israel off? Drops mic. And Yah shall bring thee back into Egypt in ships, by the way whereof I said unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there you shall sell yourselves unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. We went over last night the linguistics aspect earlier this morning in regards to maps and so forth and so on. What we're showing in part 4 is the raw part in this particular case. So we want that to be noted for edification reasoning. Are there any questions? Shalom. Most High bless.